not being honest about it can cause trouble then.
Does secret spending ever emerge?
And I always kind of thought, like, why does this make you uncomfortable? Like, it's probably the biggest cause of argument, really. You should have some sense of financial independence as well. What are you doing? Like, saw that there was an extra transaction.
Being in a relationship has lots of financial advantages, but only if a couple are on the same page. Some quietly build wealth together, while others hide spending from each other. Joining me today to explore this is Leah McMahon, who is a financial planner with Fairstone Limerick. Leah, you're very welcome to Money Talks.
Thank you for having me.
So, Leah, you work with lots of couples.
I do. Majority of my, I suppose, clients are couples.
Okay. You give them some clear guidelines, you give them a plan, you give them goals to reach. I imagine some of those couples reach those goals in a timely fashion and others maybe don't. And I'm curious, what is it about the couples that do? What characteristics set them apart?
I think so. I suppose in terms of kind of their goals and getting there together, like you see it a lot as a financial planner, like you step into the role primarily to bring them together, work on their finances, achieve their goals. But I suppose as you build a relationship with them, you do become a third party, in the relationship, a part-time nearly counsellor, therapist, if you like, because I suppose once you have a couple that opens up about what's going on, because it's not just about looking at, pensions, protection, mortgages. It's actually about what makes them make different decisions and what makes them maybe achieve something quicker, or what makes something take longer to get to. And I think probably the first key thing is probably the honesty around how they're spending. So when it comes to, yes, they're probably very aware of what each other are earning, whether they're paying into a pension and work, they've committed, maybe have bought a house together, they're both on the mortgage, life assurance. They've sat down together and gotten over that kind of first step in terms of buying a house together. But when it comes to probably the medium to short-term goals, maybe either buying a new car, starting a family, someone's going to have to take time out of work at that stage. It kind of comes down to, I suppose, when the income comes into the house, yes, a certain aside portion of it has to go towards, paying the mortgage, paying the electricity and the groceries, I suppose all the regular things. But the other side then is discretionary income and savings. And it's probably being honest about, how much you're maybe discretionarily spending, whether you have loans or not. I know, I've spoke previously about kind of being honest about the level of debt that you carry, because going into a relationship, especially when you're married as well, you're both kind of on the hook in terms of debt repayments like that, and not telling someone, I suppose, how much you owe. Maybe you're maybe inclined to overspend on the credit card, something's building up as well. That causes serious financial pressure. That causes an imbalance in the relationship and can cause arguments then as well.
Yeah, so honesty is a key factor and just a grindstone, a keystone, I should say, a keystone habit for these 100%. Couples. Okay.
And especially when, I think people in Ireland, we can be a little bit uncomfortable about talking about money. So, the first time it comes up about, not impolitely, but how much are you earning? Especially if they're going to get a mortgage together, they're going to need to know what their salaries are combined when you think of whether it's, 4 times their income. Lying on the first date saying, you're on 150,000 when you're on 40,000, that's not a great start when it comes to the time when you go for a mortgage and you're thinking your other half is on 150,000 and they've just kind of broke into maybe the 50,000 mark as well. All of a sudden you've kind of created an issue here. So it's not being embarrassed around money. It's being comfortable to say, this is where I'm at. You can build towards anything, but I suppose starting off not being honest about it can cause trouble then.
Mm-hmm. What about alignment in terms of spending style, like spender saver? Are the couples who tend to build a good, strong financial future together, do they tend to both be savers when they get together?
No, not necessarily. Like I always see, I suppose, a mix between, I definitely see more like 2 spenders together rather than 2 savers together. You have people, I suppose, and they have different levels of being able to save. Someone will be able to save €1,000, someone will just about be able to save €250, but they still have that discipline. They still have that habit of still putting that €250 away no matter what happens in the month. It generally tends to be, a saver and a spender, but not always out of control either. You just have someone that might spend a little bit more, but like that, you're kind of blending 2 lifestyles together. Someone might have grown up where, money might have been tight around the house, so they kind of inherently have this quality of always having to save money, always kind of looking for, you know, something's going to come up out of the blue. And then you might have a couple or where the one person, you know, never really had to worry about money. You know, whenever they ran out, they might have been able to ask their parents. Sometimes it comes from childhood, how money was spoken about, you know, if people were honest about it, if it was discussed at the table. Because I think that's where the awkwardness comes with money, that, oh, we didn't talk about money when I was younger. You know, it became a thing of, well, I'm not going to talk about money. Whereas when you have, I suppose, a couple and there's a saver and a spender, really they just need a plan. They just need a focus point. It's not, you're not really kind of, you know, changing who they are. You're kind of maybe kind of trying to break a little bit of a bad habit and give them direction. So, you know, they've always been used to maybe discretionarily spending €1,000 a month, whereas now you're saying, right, you can still spend €500 a month discretionarily. I want to move that 500 that's left over. I want to move it towards that new car that you've been talking about, or move it towards that holiday that you want to go on for, you know, your 10-year anniversary. It's just trying to put, I suppose, the bigger things that I suppose are medium or long term at the focus, because it is very, very hard to kind of say, you know, I'm going to put money away today and I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm not going to go out and do X, Y and Z because I'm going to save for something that's 12 months down the line. You know, sometimes like the discipline is hard there when, you know, I suppose the phrase that I do hear is, you know, you could die tomorrow. Like realistically and statistically you won't. So we do need to plan as well in that sense. But direction is the biggest thing that, you know, put the focus on something, putting pen to paper and working with a planner then as well that knows exactly what you're working towards and can, like that, be a sounding board, but can also keep you on that track and not kind of let you get a bit complacent saying, okay, maybe, you know, we'll push it out another 6 months. They'll say, no, this is what you set out to do and we're getting there.
The couples who are better at this than others, do they communicate better with one another?
Definitely. They definitely speak to each other. And I think, you know, there's times where things crop up and they feel like, oh, you know, I'm not going to be able to do this month. And it's sitting down and say, right, okay, you can't put away 500 quid this month. You can only manage to get 350. I'll put 150 away. You know, I'll put the extra 150 away. I have it this month. And it's the communication, because there are going to be times in a relationship where it's not going to be, you know, 100% effort from both sides. Someone's going to only have 50 in the tank and the other person has to top it up then as well. So it's about communicating and saying, you know, this isn't working for me in this way. Can we, you know, move the term of it? Can we maybe, you know, if you're trying to save 20 grand for something specific, can we maybe, like, do we need it? Do we need that exact, you know, level of expenditure? Could we do the same thing for 15,000? You know, obviously with, I suppose, mortgage deposits, it's very clear. You know, it's if you're a first time buyer, it's 10%. But buying a new kitchen, you know, if you've been quoted 25 grand for a new kitchen and, you know, the spec of it is fantastic and everything, but, you know, shopping around, you see you could do the same thing for 20 grand. And it, you know, I suppose communicating with each other and saying that I know the goal is to get a new kitchen, but I don't feel comfortable spending that much money on it. It's very, very much about communicating and being on the same page, because if you're not on the same page and you're, you know, one person is, I suppose, has a pessimistic view of, you know, I don't want to be doing this, and the other person is saying this is exactly what I want to be doing, I suppose it starts kind of an undercurrent where someone's not happy. And things are harder to do when you're not happy about it. You know, we nearly kind of fight it.
Yeah. Does secret spending ever emerge when you're consulting with clients, with couple clients?
It does. And probably the most common way I see it is actually in the likes of like Revolut. Because obviously, you know, we're kind of in an age now where it's Revolut, it's N26. You know, we've so many different platforms that people do have, I suppose, an Irish bank account. They might get paid into it and the direct debits and everything normal comes out of that. And then people top up the Revolut. They might use the pockets or the vaults and saving and spending kind of from there. But it's kind of from the transaction stuff that comes out in the Revolut that I suppose in my experience I've seen in the past, you know, I suppose we've seen areas where one spouse didn't realise that the other person gambled as much as they did. Yeah. And this is kind of things that come to light, you know, it could come to light in the face of a mortgage where, you know, the banks don't particularly like to see that, you know, excessive gambling, kind of, I suppose, small little bets, you know, the time at Cheltenham, things like that. They're very self-explanatory, but like that kind of consistent gambling obviously isn't looked at very great by the bank. And this kind of starts, I suppose, other kind of, excessive shopping, you know, retail shopping as well. it very much, I suppose, comes back to, you have a budget, you've agreed a budget. You should have a certain level of discretionary income where it doesn't matter where that goes. That's the money that you have, for working hard, for paying your bills, to enjoy this month. But once that level of money is gone, you can't take, you can't take from savings. You can't skip out on any bills. So it's within your, I suppose, authority to control that and not go over, the 400, 500 euro that you have as discretionary. That's the money that belongs to, I suppose, the no answers pot.
Sure.
Anything beyond that starts to pull away from the things you've decided together, could get you in trouble if, like that, you can't fill up the car to go to work, to bring the kids to school, can't pay for the groceries, can't pay for the electricity. So I suppose kind of hidden expenditure patterns, they're very obvious once a financial planner kind of sits down with you, because there are some cases where, I know from speaking to couples where we've done a budget, they've told me what they've, I suppose, typically spend in a month, and I can see all the things that are missing from it. So I can see that they've no subscriptions. In this day and age, everybody is subscribed to something. You don't have to have loads of subscriptions, but there's definitely one there. Local property tax is one that they kind of forget about, kind of your TV licence, underestimating what they're spending on fuel, petrol or diesel. Grocery bills are massively underestimated,
Yes.
And what they spend. And I would always say, if you want to get in control with your grocery expenditure, it's the likes of the online shopping. So whether it's delivery, click and collect, because you can see that number as you're spending. When you get to the till, it could be anything, and you have to pay that. And that's where the kind of over expenditure can come sometimes then as well. But I suppose kind of the hidden expenditure, yes, it definitely, you have to be upfront, and you have to say, this is what I like, this is what I value, because once it's not harming your financial plan, your goals for the future, the security of the family, then you're entitled to spend your hard-earned money on what you like as well. If it's not doing any harm to anyone, then yes, but there has to be a control element to it. So it is very important to say, this is what I value, this is what you value, this is what we've agreed, and communicate on that.
Yes. What about people who earn very different salaries? Yes. One's on a very high and one's on a medium to low salary. How did they negotiate that in your experience?
So I think coming to me as a couple, and I see it a lot. I would say in 70% of the couples that I work with, there's a big difference between the salary, and it's not necessarily, I know that we do have salary disparity, but it isn't always the time that men are earning more. It might be the wife. But in terms of, I suppose, sitting down, naturally they might just say, I put 500 euro into this account, and then I put 300, I contribute 300 or 400 towards the mortgage, and then we don't really know. So we don't really know what we should be contributing to each of the bills, the breakup of it. But I do find that I'm always struggling, or I always need to ask, is there any chance you could, kind of help me until next week? And this is where you kind of look at breaking it down into the income that comes into the house, how much of the 100% income that comes into the house do you contribute? So if you're in a position where it's 50-50, very easy then to say, look, 50% of the budget, I'll contribute, and then you'll do the balance. But if it's a case of, it's 60-40 or 70-30, if you're going 50-50, especially in the cases where someone earns, 70% of the income that comes into the house, the person that's on the 30%, those doing that 50-50, that is going to cripple them. They're not going to have any, they're going to have very minimal discretionary income. They're not going to, I suppose, feel great in terms of working towards their goals, because they really don't have it. And I find as well, especially when we kind of look at parents, in the kind of, I suppose, the mother and the father situation, generally, with a mom and a dad in terms of expenditure, and I see it myself with my daughter, there's things that we budget for and things that kind of crop up. And normally I would kind of, if Ella needs a new pair of shoes, I'll go and buy them. I won't factor that into the budget. So there's kind of hidden costs that come out that, yes, okay, I'm, as a mother, the person might only put 700 euros into the joint account, but they might actually spend another 500 euros in the month from different things that cropped up with the kids that's not factored in. So it looks, as if, well, where's all your money going? And it's actually a case of, well, I'm actually spending on the kids. So you need to factor in then, yes, we have a household pot, but then we also need to have a kids pot, because there's always a summer camp, there's always an Easter camp, there's always a new pair of shoes or a new pair of boots for training. There's always something coming up with kids. And generally I find, when I sit down and I chat to men and women in a relationship, the moms do take that on board. They take kind of ownership of it. So they are spending. It's just, I suppose it's not seen, it's not very, very obvious. So it kind of comes across then as if, they're not really contributing. So it's about looking at the whole picture then as well.
What about if a parent decides to stay at home? I mean, there's a longer term piece there where they might not get all their state pension stamps and all the rest of it. So how do you negotiate something like that?
So, and like that, I've had clients like that who have taken time out of the workforce, and then I suppose you get to be in the privileged position where you have a couple that comes to you, and one of them is talking about planning to do this. So then you're on I suppose you're a step ahead then, in that sense that you can look at it and say, right, okay, typically I suppose nowadays 6 months maternity isn't really the norm, because most kids can't get into a creche until they're actually 12 months. So you're at the very beginning planning for at least a 12-month stint out of work. If you're in the fortunate position where, the first 6 months are paid, great. Then you're only really looking at the shortfall in the next 6 months. But then again, not everywhere is paying full maternity leave. Some people are reliant on the government benefit, which I think at the moment is somewhere in around, is it $250 per week? So somewhere like that. I know it was $240 when I had Ella. And, for a lot of people, what they normally earn, there's a big difference in that, especially when it comes to paying for things, and all the new costs that come with having kids. So what you're looking at is, it's not just from an income point of view of replacing the income. They may decide that, especially if they've a couple of kids as well, they may decide that, right, I'm most likely going to take about 3 years out of work. So instantly you're talking about, okay, there's 3 years out of work, there's 3 years you're not paying into a pension, and there's also 3 years of maybe not getting a salary increase. If you're in the position where like that, you likely get one. You might have 3 years where you don't get a bonus if your job is like that. And there's 3 years of probably experience and positions that, promotions that you might miss as well. So there is a big cost like that. And for us, I suppose what we look at is sitting down and saying, there's a financial number behind that. And when it comes to how we budget and save, we plan for that. That becomes a goal that, whether it's 20,000 you need to save or it's 30,000 you need to save, you need to restructure how, I suppose, you're 60-40 in terms of who's paying what bills then as well. Mm-hmm. Because, the person that stays at home with the kids, they're not off for that time at all. There's doctor's appointments, there's just the general day-to-day of minding kids. They're not on holiday. They are working, but they're not being paid for that.
Yes.
So we have to look at it in the sense of, this is the impact that it might have. So you calculate in terms of the pension, and generally, it's not, if you're taking a year out of work, 3 years, it's not going to be a huge knock-on effect either. It really is trying to, I suppose, gear them up when they go back into work. Let's slightly increase pension contributions, maybe start AVCs, and let's start going back into, into the company, into management, and saying, I want an increase. Talking about salary increases, looking for an increase in your salary.
Yes, yeah. So in that sense, the couples who do it well, are they kind of like accountability partners for each other? Are they kind of raising each other up and making sure that they're...
Completely. And they're both on board as well. They both recognise, because, I have met couples where, someone has joked that, oh yeah, no, they're on holiday. And I think my job there is never to be rude to anyone, but to actually, cement that they're not on holiday. They're making sacrifices. I know, sometimes, like I remember I said, there's some days where you'd actually say it's easier to go to work than just stay at home and be a parent. There's some times where it is, because it's hard. But it's them both being on the same page, and the other person knowing the sacrifice that the person who's staying at home is making. That's what's important as well.
Yes. You mentioned at the start about debt and the importance of, putting the cards on the table at the start of a relationship. I'm wondering what you, 'cause you're a financial planner, when you met your partner, when did you start having those conversations? And I know it's not prescriptive. I know it's not at 3 months you should, but I'm just curious.
Myself and Al have been together about 10 years, so we would have been in our, I suppose, early 20s, and I suppose we were both never really uncomfortable with money. That, I suppose, I think it's how I've grown up as well, that I've never expected someone else to pay my own way. So I was very much like, I'll get this, and Dal was like, no, I'll get the dinner, and I always kind of thought like this, why does this make you uncomfortable? Like, and Dal was like, oh, like I want to get the dinner, and I'm like, you got it the last time.
Yeah.
So that was probably something that we both had to get used to. Probably trying to not fall into the norm of, I suppose, that typical men pay for everything and women don't, because I've always wanted to be financially independent, even before becoming a financial planner. And then I suppose as I got into financial planning, when I entered financial services, generally, yes, I do take the lead in terms of, how we, I suppose, budget in terms of our income then as well, because we would have kind of slightly different income. So what someone contributes versus the other person. But when it comes to like our shared goals, but like that, there can be times, I suppose, where, you know, we both have things independently that we're, you know, whether, I suppose, Al at the moment, his friend is getting married, so they're gone off to Portugal for a couple of days. So that's kind of a separate goal that, like that, he's kind of quietly saving for. And there can be conversations sometimes where, you know, trying to do something together. Like, we're getting married in September, so we've got roughly about 5 months until we're getting married. So that's obviously a big kind of spending day. So what we're looking at then, obviously saving towards that, but it's the understanding as well that it's, you know, it can't all be about the same goal, and every bit of spare change that we have going into that, it's saying, yes, we have to find a way to say, let's do this towards this goal together. I'm working on something independently, you're working on something independently. But, you know, in most relationships, like, it's not smooth sailing when it comes to finances. Like, they're probably the biggest cause of argument, really, because people, I suppose, when they get under pressure with money, you know, it gets emotional, it gets harder to see. And that's why, you know, when I was talking earlier about kind of becoming a part-time counsellor, sometimes part of the job is to actually say, take a breath. You know, you're very heavily fixated on getting there, and you're actually starting to argue with each other because, you know, you're criticising why, you know, you shouldn't be doing this now because we're concentrating on this. You have to have the freedom and flexibility then as well to say, right, you know, there's a life to be lived in between, and not get kind of stuck on, you know, getting to the finish line and kind of sacrificing everything in the middle. Because especially when you look at retirement, you know, generally when people invest, people think about saving and where to save and everything, you know, they do think about pensions and putting money away. And I can see people that have, you know, a credit card balance, they might have a car loan, you know, they might have annual things that they, like a holiday or Christmas, different things like that. And they, you know, they're very happy to just pay the minimum on the car loan, pay the minimum on the credit card, and put a lot of money into their pension. And yes, there's, you know, huge tax benefits, and yes, they are going to retire, but they spend a lot of time then kind of, you know, when you put money into a pension, it's locked away until retirement.
Yes.
So for some people that could be 20, 30 years away. And then they have a lot of maybe debt or things coming up that they're finding they're struggling with because they've kind of maybe looked at the long term too heavily. You know, so it's about, I suppose, focus and saying what do you want. And same as myself and Al, you know, we're chipping away towards retirement, we're chipping away towards planning the wedding, you know, all of the little bits in between. But it's communication as well. And I think it's the understanding, because, you know, nobody's perfect as well. And these are habits that, yes, you form over time, and then all of a sudden you have to change a habit slightly. And then, you know, and that becomes harder then as well. Or, you know, you've completed a goal, and all of a sudden then it's what's next. Sometimes there isn't anything next immediately, and it's just kind of about saving and having, you know, a bit of an emergency buffer. But it's the understanding as well to know that people are different and kind of to accept them as well. And oftentimes people have to help then as well, you know, especially like that when you're taking time out of work. Like when I took time out of work for Ella, you know, Al would have been the main person there. You know, and it's having that, I suppose, person that you feel comfortable talking to.
Yes.
You know,
do you and Al have a shared bank account?
We do. We have a joint account. Okay. So we're both with the AIB. We both get paid in, and we choose, like, say, manually put money into the joint account, and then like that we've both Revolut then as well. So we'd operate out of a joint account for like things that basically belong to the house. You know, any of those kind of household bills. Then we have kind of a joint savings pot together, and then, you know, we both then independently save, and then discretionary spend independently then as well. Because I think the main thing is that, yes, as a household, you know, you run a household together, but you should have some sense of financial independence as well. And that's what I see a lot of the times as well with couples when I'm speaking to them, that I want you both to be financially independent, working together. So not, you know, I'm doing this, you're doing that, and they're struggling in the middle. It's, I want you both to be set up in the sense of you're contributing towards this household. But at the end of the day, if anything ever happens, nobody is stuck. They can walk away if they need to walk away because they're financially independent. And that can be a little bit hard. And sometimes it comes down to as well, when you're looking at like the likes of life assurance, you know, knowing that, yes, you have your own savings accounts and you have your own pension, but kind of underestimating then, touch wood, if your partner did pass away, how much you're reliant on them then as well, that having the right level of life assurance in place, that yes, you can be financially independent, but you can't ignore as well that if someone was all of a sudden taken out of your household, you know, touch wood, if they passed away, then there's going to be a big gap there. So it's looking at, I suppose, what suits the situations. But I think the financial independence part is huge, and it's something that I'm constantly talking about with clients, because I suppose for me, I want people to be in the positions that they're in the situations they're in because they choose to be, not because they feel stuck, that they feel like they don't have any other option.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a couple break up over money?
At this moment in time, no. But I suppose I've had kind of feelings in the past that potentially, because sometimes when money, I suppose, becomes the big issue at the time, and that's what you're fixing, but it's the behaviours and sometimes the attitudes that come out of that you wonder, is it actually the money, or is the money just maybe blindfolding everyone at the moment, and that's been kind of pinpointed as the issue, and once we get to this particular goal, this is going to be okay. And it's hard to work towards a goal, especially if it's not immediate. If it is 6 months or 12 months, or for some people even 5 years away, like, it does take a lot of discipline and to keep going and to keep saving and staying on the track for that. But sometimes it can be a bit, I suppose, when they don't align, when that they're kind of maybe not communicating, they might be arguing, and you can kind of see that this isn't really about the money. They just maybe don't click the way that they used to, or maybe they don't respect each other in the sense of what someone thinks matters, so what someone thinks is important. So sometimes there can be arguments about, well, like, if you take 12 months or 2 years out of work, that's, I'm going to have to do this, and this is going to be harder now, and this is going to be stressful. But not understanding then that they're not taking 12 months or 2 years. It might be for kids. For some people, they might need time out of work because, in terms of their own mental health. And recognising that your partner, in terms of stress, is really not feeling good where they're at, and maybe needs some time out of work to figure out what they want to do and be happier. Because that's the thing, like, there's so much going on. We get so busy kind of with our day-to-day life that the real goal is actually to be happy in the middle of it all. And obviously, happiness, like sadness, is temporary. But to be, to know that, okay, I'd like to do it, and I'd like if it came sooner, but this is what we're on track for. This, it's going to take this long, but I'm happy as well. I'm happy that, and grateful that we're working towards this, not just to be kind of chasing that happiness that, once we buy a house now, I'll be happy. You should be happy in the middle of it too.
So to backtrack, honesty, communication.
Yes.
A shared long-term vision,
Yes.
would that be fair to say?
Absolutely.
And any other habits that kind of jump out at you for couples who, like we said, quietly build wealth together and are on the same page?
I think respectful accountability.
Interesting.
So I suppose I put the word respectful in because it can be very easy sometimes to nitpick and say, what are you doing? Like, I saw that there was an extra transaction, I'm holding you accountable. And sometimes it can be very, feel targeted. But the respectful accountability to say, right, okay, we kind of need to get back on board now. I noticed that there's been a little bit of an overspend this month, and there hasn't been anything really that warranted it, that kind of maybe deserved the overspending. But to say maybe we should sit down and check in and say, in terms of our budget, if that's not working, maybe we should have a look at that, or maybe we should sit down with our financial planner. And I think as well, having a financial planner, I think sometimes people think having a financial planner is for people that are wealthy.
Yeah.
A financial planner is for any level of income. You could be earning 30 grand or you could be earning 300 grand. It's someone that's, I suppose, is the third partner there to keep your goals at the forefront, but also to keep the peace as well. Because it takes, I suppose, the bickering out of it where, you're kind of sitting down together and you're looking at it. It's the financial planner that sits down and is telling you what you need to do and working with you. It's those people, the financial planners, they're the people that you're kind of accountable then, so once you're doing what you were asked to do and the other person is, things should flow in a more, I suppose, harmonious way together then, rather than kind of constantly saying, what are you doing? What am I doing? It's having maybe someone external that doesn't have the emotional attachment to it.
Yeah.
I can kind of call it like it is.
And the couples who aren't sitting down with a financial planner or advisor, and they're just sitting down with one another. I'm reading lots more now about like money meetings, financial audits, this idea of sitting down with your partner once a month to just get it all out on the table. Do you think that's a good practice?
I think it's a great practice because not everyone needs, I suppose different financial planners will jump in and out of people's lives. They're always there in the background. But for tasks like that, money meetings, budget meetings, I think it's great practice for couples to do it. Sometimes you can manage that yourself. Like, not all of the clients that I have do I get into that nitty gritty budgeting style. Sometimes it's purely got to do with savings, investments and pensions. So if you can sit down and like that, have no arguments and come up with a plan together and both be on the same page, then absolutely work away. It's the times, I suppose, when it's not working and it's creating arguments that you're looking at. Do we need maybe someone? And it mightn't be, it might be one meeting that you do and you sit down with and you kind of just get on track with that. And then you might have a check-in the following year. So it's not, I think sometimes with financial planning, people think, it's going to be this big undertaking. We do a lot of the work on our side to come back and say, you need to do X, Y and Z. Here's an action plan. Let's start, ticking things off the list. We do a lot of the the back of the house stuff. But no, I think it creates an honest, open space. And it shows as well that, if they both sit down, they're both working on their budgets, they're both working on the goals that they have. And like that, if you need to save 10 grand in 12 months, you can divide that by 12 and you have to save €833 per month. It's very easy to do some of these things. Going through your bank statement, seeing where the excess expenditure is going, there's the names of where you're spending outside of, maybe your mortgage and Electric Ireland, whoever you pay your electricity with. So those kind of things, if they're not creating an argument and you're, I suppose, happy to do it, because some people love doing that. Some people love Excel sheets. Then you're perfectly fine to continue doing that. It's if it's not working, maybe it's time to ask for a little bit of help.
Leah McMahon, thank you so much for joining me.